Hello, hockey world. So, Mike, I am not often jealous of Nick Kyprios, but
Oh, because he was sitting next to Tim Cook.
yes, well, I am. Did you see Tim Cook last night?
I did not.
No, I was wondering. I didn't think anybody would be able to get close to Tim Cook, probably, but yeah, he was in Canada, and I just seeing Tim Cook, who I follow on Twitter,
Yeah,
and
but there was somebody else there too. It was Tim Cook, and there was somebody else sitting next to him. That was the Canadian tennis player Denis Shapovalov.
Oh, El
okay,
Chapo.
Yeah, it's like honestly, if I'm going to choose a Canadian tennis player to sit next to, it's going to be Jeannie Bouchard, who, by the way,
follow on Instagram. Must follow Jeannie Bouchard on Instagram.
well, talk about somebody who had their 15 minutes of fame, and now the son of a bitch is going to get it again. The guy who challenged Jeannie Bouchard during the Super Bowl last year that the Patriots would not come back and win.
Oh, right.
He won the bet when they came back, and she went out on a date with him. And now apparently yesterday somebody offered them 2 Super Bowl tickets to go to the Super Bowl in Minnesota. And apparently the response was, Jeannie's up for it. Like, this guy's not going to say he's up to go to a Super Bowl and sit next to Jeannie Bouchard. Yeah.
yeah.
I
think that's all right. Yeah. We're not live. We are live, but we're not.
You guys know what the real reason Tim Cook was there for, right?
Yeah, I know.
No. Babcock wanted him to come in because he had no idea how to slow the Avalanche down, and seeing as Cook's been able to slow every iPhone down, he figured that was his best advantage.
Very nice. Very nice. Timely. You have to know what's going on in technology. I like it. In general. Yeah, Tim Cook. Yep, that's very, very well done.
It piles on Babcock, which is what every Leafs.
And it piles on Babcock and the Leafs at the same time. Yes, so I think that was pretty amazing. I know he was actually in Toronto for this coding initiative for the children, which is a really great thing.
No, yes, Peter, it was a very good thing he was there.
I was going to say I was envious of Kevin he'll probably be at the opening ceremonies in Pyeongchang, because he'll be there to watch Tessa Virtue carry the Canadian flag. Other than that, I wouldn't watch the opening ceremonies, but since she's going to carry the American flag, I'm interested.
Yeah, no, I may be there. I get in actually the day before the Olympics, which is as late as I've ever been into the Olympics. So, I mean, it's probably a good thing. Just it's a fewer days to be in country, as they call it in the military. But
right,
and then I come home, of course, on trade. I'm flying back on trade deadline day. So
that's incredible.
The first trade deadline I've missed in 31 years.
So you're hoping that there's Wi-Fi in the plane so your phone can just ring off the hook, right?
Well, actually not. I mean, it'll be fun to sort of land and see what happened while I was.
You're not going to Wi-Fi it on the plane?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm not planning to work. I mean, we're going to handle it. Jimmy Haskell, my editor, and Mike Brem, who is my former editor, who has done a lot of hockey coverage, is going to just have to handle it. I mean, it's just one of those fluky things that, so I guess we'll see. I mean, my curiosity killed the cat and may get the best of me on a 17-hour flight home.
Imagine not wanting to at least check in on HockeyBuzz.com and seeing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, Kevin, did I ever tell you that? And I'll be quick because we got to start the show. Have I ever told you the story about me during the trade deadline when I was a kid? The only way for me to find out the updates and the trades was to call Sports Phone in New York. It was a call that cost like 85 cents a minute back in the day, and it was a 914 area code number. And I called this thing on trade deadline day. They updated every 10 minutes. I called every 10 minutes from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then the phone bill came the following month, and it was over $200. And I was lucky to stay alive.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Geez, that's a. I mean, back then it really was like the phone bills per call, and so. Yeah,
I mean, I remember early internet for me on the trade deadline was like HF boards, right? That was the only place you could go. That was where I remember going to. Right? Those message boards where everybody was posting everything, that was happening in their local town.
That makes the Hockey Buzz chat room look like the New York Times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but back then that was it. I mean, that was really it.
Well, unless you lived in Canada.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You know,
Right.
when you really appreciate Canada is on trade deadline day when, you know, they have gavel to gavel coverage of the trade deadline. You know, I mean, and it really is like a holiday. You know, I mean, I think don't people actually call in sick on trade deadline day?
Oh yeah, all the time.
You knew I was sick from whatever school I was going to on 2 days. NFL draft when it was done in the afternoon, the mornings, not an event like it was done in the mornings. It was on ESPN and the NHL trade deadline. I would call in sick both, or I would be sick those days.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never.
By the way, before we get started, has everyone seen the movie The Post?
No,
not yet. I want to though.
Well, it's an incredible movie, and you know the story. It's not like I don't appreciate the importance of the story. I mean, this is the Pentagon Papers, the Ellsberg, you know, situation, and a very important in journalism history. But for me, it's been a stroll down memory lane because of the journalistic process that's on display. Like, and I wrote about it on Facebook today. It's you know, blue pencil editing. It's chasing down stories and deadlines, and you know, a wire copy that rolls off a teletype machine that would be, you know, a long story would be 8 or 10 feet long, and it would trail like a bridal gown as you sort of carried it into the newsroom from the wire room. I mean, it really, as my wife said during the movie, when the presses were running, she said, you know, you can almost smell the newsprint. Like it was, you know, that was just where I started my career was typewriters and, you know, you pounding stories. And, you know, I actually, a couple of times in my career, I actually was able to say the words, "This is Alan, give me rewrite." You know, you know, and you kind of saying, you know, I need you to dictate, you know, and you'd be staring at your notepad and you're composing a story as you go. And, you know, you'd say, you know, Smith said, period, you know, new paragraph. And then you know,
there you go. That's oh man.
Yeah. The one thing, and I haven't seen the movie, but I talked to friends who have. The one thing I like that I heard from them, which is a great way of transitioning from that movie, because it was pre-Watergate, to All the President's Men, which is obviously the story of Watergate, is the last scene in The Post is the break is like the like flashlights in a room for the Watergate break-in, which I think is perfect. Is because that's where All the President's Men starts, and that's where that movie ends. That's great. I love that.
Yeah,
stuff.
no, and the groundwork for you know, the Watergate story is sort of laid out in this Ellsberg, because after the Pentagon Papers, there was a general sort of mistrust of what the government was telling us, and that was certainly you know, true. I mean, because what's lost about the Pentagon Papers is it wasn't just the current administration. This had carried over you know, 5 presidencies.
Right.
And back to Truman, yeah.
Yeah, you know, the Democrats and Republicans, everybody was lying. John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, you know, Richard Nixon. They were all just, you know, lying about why we were in, you know, Vietnam. And there's a very telling, you know, speech in the movie when basically that was said and stated in the Pentagon Papers that 70% of the reason why we were in Vietnam was because of the pride of not wanting to admit we were going to lose the war. I mean, it's really dramatic stuff. And considering that, you know, so many people today don't, you know, kind of remember that, it's a very important movie for this generation. So.
Oh, definitely. No, that's amazing. I remember one time I was I forget who I was talking to, but someone was putting up quotes. This was when I was working as an intern at the Inquirer in college, and it was a public official saying something, and I said to the person I was with, I was just following along, seeing them do it, like, how do you know that they're telling you the truth? And he says, we don't, but things like the Pentagon Papers eventually come out. And that was something that was said to me back, you know, in 1990 in high school. I was like,
well, what is one of my favorite lines ever from a movie? It was Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men yelling, "But you can't handle the truth."
Yeah.
Well, that is certainly true today, because in today's society, we cannot handle the truth because we simply don't believe it.
Right.
We don't believe what our president says, and people don't believe what normal citizens say. Nobody believes anybody. So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Nobody can handle the truth.
Well, I believe in hockey, and we'll move on from there. I still get this too. I still get the AP style book every year. This is like the one thing that I keep on from college, from 1990 on. I still get it.
Is a locker room one word or two words in the AP style book?
I will find out for you. Let's first intro the show.
Yeah,
ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Hockey World. It is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Chesky.
Kevin Allen, USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. HockeyBuzz is one word, by the way. If you're paying attention to it. And this is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And Kevin, we're talking about coming back from the Olympics. And you'll miss the wall-to-wall coverage of the Evander Kane sweepstakes, or will you? Will Evander Kane be gone before then? That was my title of today. Because talking to a lot of people, I think he will be gone before then. I think Evander Kane's going to get done within the next couple of weeks. The person I talked to today said that Botterill's playing it very close to the vest, obviously trying to get a lot, not wanting to make mistakes that may have been made in recent Buffalo transactions, that he wants to make sure he gets the most he can out of this trade. But at the same time, there's definitely a lot of teams that feel that, this is a player who could help them out enough to maybe get into the playoffs, and why wait 4 weeks to get him? So we're in a spot now. What do you think, Kev? You think it happens earlier?
I do. I completely agree with you on this. I have spoken to two general managers in the last week, and both people told me the same thing. There's very little going on right now, but both of them also thought that Evander Kane was going to, go first or pretty soon. And that the problem is that the Sabres do want a lot. They've established what they want, and everyone's afraid to sort of engage at this point because they don't want to give up that much. But because if you're going to take Evander Kane, this was one of the theories that the one general manager put, you're really trying to convince yourself that you're going to keep him beyond this season. So you're going to try to resign him. So, because that's the only way to justify the big price that the Sabres want. So now you've got to convince yourself that he's not going to be a problem for you. You know what he can do on the ice. I mean, he's actually, when you look at his production level, it's been high in Buffalo. It really has. So you got to convince yourself he's not going to be a problem for you off the ice. And, that's the issue. But I think he's going to go within the next, 2 or 3 weeks would be my guess.
Yeah, it would make sense, Mike, or Kevin, because you want to get a jump on him, right? If you're going to pay all this, you want to get him sooner, get him into the roster, figure things out, as opposed to just add him in a month and in 40 days, right? Get him in. But I mean, to your point, the thing with Kane that I think people have overlooked, and it's certainly what so many Winnipeggers have said, was he really isn't that great. But he actually has been on a 30-goal pace for 3 seasons since he left Winnipeg. And 30 goals in today's NHL is 50 from 20 years ago. Yeah. And that's just the way it is. And there's not a lot of guys who do it and do it consistently. And Kane is one of them. Kane wants the attention. He wants to win. He's an ultra competitive guy, and he's not getting it in Buffalo. And and not to his credit, but just more to the credit of people who say there's some off ice or some attitude issues with him. He wants out. It's clear he does. He's done with the organization, but he's not making it easier on them either, which he also has to take some fault for.
I think the organization, I mean, even if they weren't, even if they weren't in 30th or 31st place, the organization is done with him too. I think it's on both sides here. And that's where, a general manager convincing himself or trying to carve out extra time to talk to Kane to get him to sign. I don't know if I put myself in a general manager's position, like I'm treating him like Alexander Semin. I would go 1 year at a time. Now somebody is going to give him a 4 or 5 year deal. That's just the reality of it. But based on him having problems off the ice in 2 different places, that would scare me away. As a mercenary, as somebody you acquire as a rental at the deadline, the race in the Western Conference is really tight with 4 or 5 teams within 3 or 4 points of each other. There are teams that need scoring. I can understand why somebody would bring him in as a rental, but a long-term situation, that would scare me off.
I think 3 years is going to be what it is. I think it's not quite long-term, but I don't think it's a 1-year deal either. I maybe I'm wrong, but maybe he can get 4 or 5 years out of somebody. But
I think he for sure will.
I think he will. Okay, yeah. I mean, I think there are trepidations about him.
Oh, for sure. But I just think, he's done enough on the ice. Of course, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, maybe I'm underselling the fear factor, but.
The skill set is enticing, Kevin. That's why. It's like, I mean, a guy who can score 30 goals, and like Peter said, they don't grow on trees. So if there's a guy out there, you're probably willing to plug your nose and accept a certain amount of problem. But it's not just the off the ice stuff. It's the internal strife that he created in Winnipeg. If he's grown up, I mean, what is he, 26, 27 years old? If he finally grows up and gets past that stuff, you got yourself a real impactful top 6 forward. But I've yet to see to that point that he's shaken off that problem. And, we'll see if, somebody is willing to give him a second or third chance.
Yeah, and it's not just the goals either. I mean, obviously the grit. The penalty minutes are there. What is he? 197 penalty minutes over the last 2 years, something like that.
Yeah.
He's got a lot, and he plays with a little fire, and he's not a small guy, and he produces. He produces goals. So he's a fascinating guy, and what you were always hoping is that you get him at the time when the light bulb goes on, and he says to himself, I'm a really good player, and if I didn't cause any problems, my life would be so much easier. Because
there's a mixture of opinions on him as far as the points, all the goals he's put up in Buffalo. On one hand, you can say he put them up in Buffalo, which is pretty impressive, right? You could sit there and say, okay, the Buffalo doesn't have a whole lot of offense going on, and he's put it on. And then the other people I talk to say, well, he's played a lot of minutes in Buffalo because they don't have a whole lot of offense going on, so that's why he's putting up those kind of numbers. If he's a third liner or a late set or a second liner.
But he's not being brought into a team to be that. It's not a Thomas Vanek situation where he was a top 6 in Detroit and then they made him a third liner in Florida. He's being brought in by a team that needs to score, that needs a top 6 forward. So, I think the only team that he could potentially go to that he wouldn't be a top 6 would maybe be Washington. And I would say Washington would make him a top 6 because he's such a good scorer. So I don't think he's going to go someplace else and be a depth guy. It would defeat the purpose of making the trade.
Yeah, now, with Mike on that, you don't make a trade for him unless you're bringing him in to play on your top 6 group.
So now has the maybe possible availability, this is what somebody brought up to me too, and I have a question for you guys. Do you think the possible availability of Pacioretty affected the Evander Kane thing at all? Like that, somebody told me that they felt it did to a degree, that, before Pacioretty was possibly available in this trade deadline, Evander Kane was by far the best scoring option out there.
I think it's 2 schools of thought here, because Kane's a rental and a team might want to acquire him to sign him, but they don't have to, and he can go free agent next summer. Whereas Pacioretty's got a year left, and it's a very reasonable salary. I think it's $4.5 million, but he's still got another year. And I think that mitigates what Bergevin is going to be asking for in a trade. He's not going to be willing to take a draft pick and a prospect. I think he wants more for Pacioretty because it's not just a 1-year fix. It's a 2-year fix.
But that's what we're saying is, like Kevin said, you're bringing in Evander Kane, you're bringing in somebody that you're hoping that you can keep there for more than a year too. So with Pacioretty, you're guaranteed you're keeping him there for more than a year.
But what could acquiring Evander Kane be? Could the payback be, or the return simply be contingent on if he signs another deal and how far they go in the playoffs too? So, say it's a conditional second, first if they get to the conference finals and he re-signs or something like that.
One of the 4 pieces reportedly is a conditional draft pick based on signing. So it could be a 4th, but if he signs, it's a 2nd. But they're still looking for a 1st-round pick, an NHL player, and a prospect, which is, that's always the package for a top 6 forward or top defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the rental price, I don't think he's going to get quite that much. I think he will get a first-round pick. And my thoughts on the first-round picks is we're now reaching the point where if you're a contending team, the first-round pick was a second-rounder not all that long ago. I mean, there's 31 teams now. So if you're picking in the bottom, I think people will be willing to do that. But, I think it could end up being a B- prospect and, that kind of thing. And I will say this now. I had a general manager that he thought Pacioretty would get traded. I don't think he will, and this is just my hunch from having watched this because, he's got 5 goals in the last 5 games. In Montreal, they can't go into rebuilding mode in Montreal. That's just not allowed.
Right.
It's just really out of the realm of possibility. He's still 29 years old, and now, despite his very, horrendous start, what's he on a pace for? 24, 25 goals? He's got 15 now.
Yeah. He's not terrible.
Well,
no. So at some point, and as Mike just pointed out, his numbers good and in terms of salary and they want so much for him. It wasn't like they're trying to if you're a contender, bringing in Pacioretty, you're going to probably create one hole to fill another.
Well,
if you're bringing him in to score. So
let me put on X hat as being Mr. Counterintuitive, because what I actually thought that when Pacioretty started scoring, that it increased the chances of him being traded, because I think now teams might actually be willing to offer up the package that Bergevin has been looking for him. Because, a guy, in spite of the fact that he scored 30 goals 4 or 5 times, them asking for a big package for him, even when his contract is reasonable, was a little out there because he wasn't having a good year. Now he's producing. Now he's the player that we know, and he's a quality forward, and, he's got playoff experience. And for a team, like a Nashville or a Pittsburgh or whoever, these teams that need top 6 forwards, he would be a good get. But I think those teams would have been a little leery about a guy who had 4 goals after a half season, but now he's got 12, and now he's producing like we know Max Pacioretty can. So maybe in a way that increases the possibility of other teams offering up what Bergevin might accept.
Yeah, he's actually got 15.
15 now. Okay.
Yeah. So, I thought it was going to be hard to trade him because they wanted so much anyway. If you're going to trade a guy like Pacioretty, it's easier to trade him, in the off season. Because, the teams that want him and need him are teams in contending, and, they want to give up, assets, not everyday players. And Montreal was trying to make a hockey trade here,
Yeah. Right.
And should Bergeron be the one making a hockey trade at this point in the game, right?
Bergeron,
yeah.
Yeah.
I always get that. I mix that name up. But I wonder, his future is certainly in question at this point, given all the turmoil there. So if you're Jeff Molson and his advisors, are you sitting there going, Mark, go ahead, make a couple hockey deals to fix this? Or are you saying, don't make any, dump what you can, we're reviewing this? It's a tough situation either way you look at it.
Yeah,
I think you're telling him to make trades because he's talking to a heck of a lot of people.
I'm getting just the opposite.
Really?
That there's not much going on right now.
That particular GM, that's the one GM I keep hearing being talked about to different people.
Yeah, but I was saying all that. Everyone expects that there's going to be a lot going on. But
yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question that Peter brings up, though, Kevin, is the fact that GMs who might be in trouble, and let's put 2 of them in proper context: Peter Chiarelli in Edmonton and Jim Benning in Vancouver. I think Benning should keep his job because the way he's been drafting the last few years, he's actually done a good job. But I believe his contract is up at the end of the year, and Vancouver's got players like Tanev and Gudbranson and Vanek who are UFAs or have a couple years left that they may be interested in trading. And does ownership allow him to make those moves if he's on thin ice? And Chiarelli in Edmonton is the same thing. Does Edmonton allow him to trade Patrick Maroon or trade I mean, they're not going to trade Ryan Nugent-Hopkins now, but in the summer they might trade Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Are they going to allow him to do that?
They're not trading Ryan Nugent-Hopkins.
You don't think so?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't, because one of the reasons why they're in this mess is they traded away too many players. And one of their issues, and they have many, one of their issues is they don't have enough scoring. So how in the world does it help them to trade Ryan Nugent-Hopkins? They don't have enough guys as it is that can play offensive enough. So I just don't see that happening. And the fallacy of trading high salaried players because you have to deal with the Draisaitl, Connor McDavid salary numbers just doesn't fit. If you look around the league, every team deals with that. Mm-hmm. And, they don't have too many, not at this point. I just don't think it's good. But I do, going back to where you made this point, I love your point about, because it's so true. When you're ownership, you've got to make a decision. Yeah. Do you really want the guy that you're going to throw out the door making that decision? I went on a radio show in Vancouver, and that was the subject of the day. And I by the way, Mike, I completely agree with you about Benning. And this, to me, I've changed my opinion on him. I thought Benning had not done a good job. But this season, and that makes two general managers, because I thought Joe Sakic had done a terrible job. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Benning this season, at the start of this year, when you watch the way this team now looks with Horvat and Barchi and Besser, and the younger players now leading the way, and the Sedins being the classy people that they are, totally accepting their new roles and doing all they can to make it easy. You look at this team, and they were kind of a fun group to watch. Mm-hmm.
They hung in there.
Younger players had re-energized this team. The problem is, and this isn't Benning's fault, Horvat got hurt, and Barchi got hurt.
Yeah, right.
And so I thought he deserved an extension. I was surprised they didn't give him one. Because if you're ownership and you were watching that team early on, you say, yeah, I get it now. Yeah, it's going to work. So I'm surprised at that. And I would allow him, if I was ownership in Edmonton, I think Peter Chiarelli is in jeopardy. So I'm not sure that I would have them making trades. So,
yeah. To your point on Benning, Kevin, the one thing he did do was he kept the team interesting enough that they're in on the NCAA UFAs, which you have to be appealing to an NCAA UFA to even get a chance. He's kept them interesting. And in some ways, had Horvat not been injured, had Barchi not been injured, where would the Canucks be sitting right now? It's sort of an interesting thing. It's a great excuse for Jim to say, well, if he goes back to the Aquilini family and say, look, guys, we were tracking really well until this went off the rails for no other things than injuries. Yeah. We have two 37-year-old guys who are having excellent seasons for what they are. There's potential here. But guess what? You also could be possibly getting a lottery pick that could get you off Dahlman. They're actually in a good situation because of bad luck. And if Benning gets a top 3 pick in this draft, with who he has with the Finnish defenseman that he took last
Levy,
he could actually put this franchise back in a really good place, particularly with the way Travis Green's been received with the education and teaching he's done with the young players.
Yeah,
and I know they've got a bit of an issue with Goldobin, with where he may feel he should be at in his playing time. But aside from that, Benning may have pulled himself out of the fire and back into the frying pan and actually be cooking up something quite nice now.
Yeah, add a Brady Tkachuk or a Svechnikov or a Dahlin into that team. Yeah. You're probably going to keep the Sedins at less than I think probably they're going to make, maybe between them $8 million, maybe $4 million each for a couple years because they want to stay in Vancouver. Yeah, right. And maybe you get, maybe it's time for Thatcher Demko to step up as the number 1 goaltender to take over for one of, either Nielsen or Markstrom. And there you go. I mean, I think they're 2 years away from being a really good team, a very competitive team in the West, and that's a lot quicker of a turnaround than I ever thought that they were going to make. I thought they had to just completely destroy that team, and they have. And one thing that Benning did this summer, he adds Delzato, Gagne, and Vanek. Vanek's 34 years old. He's second on the team in scoring. He's an expiring contract. You could do what Detroit did last year and trade him and then re-sign him because he likes it in Vancouver and bring him back. And, you know, he is something to move. You know, they're not going to make the playoffs. He is somebody you can get a really good return on and then bring him back. That's where they are right now.
Now, look, just on to that point, Mike, do you think Anders Nilsson is a trade chip at the deadline? He's got 1 year left at $2+ million. Do you think he'd garner some interest from someone if the Canucks stay as out of it as they are? Do you think he becomes a valuable commodity?
Only for a team that needs a backup for more than 1 year. I mean, Edmonton needed it with Montoya, but I don't know. I mean,
just to your point about Demko, right, and him coming in.
Yeah.
I see no value to him. I really dislike the Canucks goaltending, but I'm with Mike. I bring up Demko, keep one of those guys. It's time to see, for Demko to get, a look here. And I just, again, I can't say enough about the Sedins. Boy, what a great situation.
Yeah.
You have two veterans who I'm more than sure that they will take a highly reduced salary and they'll be so helpful for these young players.
Sometimes no ego whatsoever.
Sometimes you stumble on superstars who are not only just great players on the ice, but are just fine human beings. And there's no one that can ever say a bad word about this.
Oh yeah, no, and have two of them at the same time. That go through.
Oh, it's so impressive, and I remember talking to them at the NHL media tour a couple of years ago, and they haven't even ruled out staying and living in Vancouver for the rest of their lives. Most Swedes go home, as we know. That's just the way it goes. I mean, they love their country and they move home, but their kids have grown up in Vancouver. They're pretty Canadian. So I like the Canucks now. I like their general direction, and it's funny. It didn't take much, like adding Besser and the acceptance of the Sedin's acceptance of a more of a lesser role, and it's just sort of changed everything there. I just didn't like where they were. I was completely with Mike on that.
Benning, remember, look back to the last couple trade deadlines and Benning, we really were taking him apart. At the trade deadline, he was not doing anything to help him or hurt him. I mean, he was really, and press conferences were always very odd. Remember these strange press conferences.
Right. But it turned last year, Ak. He traded Jannik Hansen to San Jose for Goldobin, and he traded Alex Burrows to Ottawa for Jonathan Dahlen. Those were future moves. He finally got it. He got the fact that this team needed a reset.
I don't think it's he that got it. I think he was allowed to do that. I honestly think that in Vancouver they were not allowing him to do that. That's the sense that when looking back on those press conferences now with that. If you frame it in your head that this is the general manager is being told he cannot get young, he's got to try to compete now.
Yeah.
Those press conferences make sense. But at the time, the Canucks fans were losing their minds because they're like, what are we doing here? Why are we? Yeah. What's going on?
And just one more piece. They had possibly the best young forward at the World Junior in Elias Pettersson, who played for Sweden. Yep. He's going to probably be in Vancouver next year. Imagine putting him on the wing with the Sedins.
Yeah.
There you go, folks.
I think Benning's issue with regard to how he comes across in press conferences is personality. He's just not charismatic.
Yeah, that could be very nice.
We're accustomed, and we like our general managers in the NHL to carry themselves like Ray Shero or George McPhee or Ken Holland, and we like. Maybe not quite bombastic, but we like charismatic general managers, and he doesn't fit that.
Yeah, in the Canadian market, it's almost it's a necessity. Yeah. And Kevin Cheveldayoff is the next closest to Benning in the hierarchy of oddest GMs in Canada.
Yeah.
Hockey. And he's just not overly exciting.
Right.
But then you go to, Chiarelli's a quote machine.
Yeah.
But, you've got Burke just standing behind Treliving. Like, Burke's right there. You've got Sweet Lou. Ottawa's a bit of a different thing right now, but then you got Bergevin. Like, I mean, it's fun times in Canada, and it requires that.
Yeah. No, I agree. We want our GMs to, you trust guys who can talk a good game. So
yeah, but one city that usually is kind of okay with the more laid back thing would be Vancouver, but they were definitely getting, it was even getting a lot for them. You really sense that. I mean, the one thing I'll say here about Vanek, and I've been trying to get trade rumors on him and seeing if there's any possibility of him going anywhere, Mike, because of what you said, Yeah. And I haven't gotten a whole lot yet, with the exception of one person throwing Pittsburgh out there.
Well,
and Pittsburgh, to me, that just makes sense. Like this feels like doing the trade deadline long enough that we're going to say that Vanek has been traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins,
right,
on trade deadline day. Like that just.
I've heard a third and a fifth for Vanek.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the thing, Vanek, I think unfairly is being labeled because of the couple times that he's been traded at the deadline. He was traded from the Islanders to Montreal, and he failed in Montreal. He did okay in the regular season, but then in the playoffs he didn't do well. And then last year he gets traded from Detroit to Florida, and Florida misused him, put him in a third-line role rather than in a second-line role, and
right.
He didn't play well there. And now the book out on him is, okay, when he gets traded at the deadline, he doesn't come through. If you use him the right way, he'll come through. He's a very talented forward. You put him in front of the net in the power play, and he'll score goals. But don't expect him to be a checker. He's a scorer. He's always been a scorer.
Mike's right on. I've heard the same thing, that the knock on him is people like Thomas Vanek. They like the way he plays, but they're fearful he is a regular season player who can create goals. But when the intensity is dialed up, and when there's no room, and when there's somebody on you and in your face and pounding you, that he won't be able to do it. Now, fair or unfair, because Mike's points are well taken. He was not put in a favorable position in Florida. But right now he's in I got to prove that I'm a playoff performer, and that's why the market for him, while teams are interested, they don't want to pay a lot. They want to pay 2 draft picks or a C prospect and a 3rd round pick, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's pointless to bring him in if you're not going to play him with skilled players. That's just the bottom line.
Well, I think teams are willing to play him with skilled players. They just don't think he's going to be able to do it. Now they're worried about it now.
Yeah.
So I mean, Florida. I mean, Mike was absolutely right. I don't know why they even brought him in, but
in Montreal they played him on like the 4th line. Remember that Montreal, and they had a great run.
But early on they did.
He worked his way down to the 4th line.
Yeah,
that's what happened to Montreal.
Right.
They tried him and it just didn't work out. So,
now, one thing on Vancouver, and it's a constant story coming out of there, is the level of, I guess, impatience the fan base has, but some of the concerns, even the coach who just had a new quote today about Jake Virtanen. And I'm wondering how long that relationship stays in that thing, even though he's coming to the end of his ZLC. Mm-hmm. You wonder, is this just a bad match in terms of the organization, what they want? And is Jake Virtanen someone who could eventually say, we got to cut ties with this and go a different direction?
Well, they thought Travis Green was going to be the one guy who would get something out of Virtanen, because when they sent Virtanen down to Utica, he played well down there. Yeah. But if he can't get good play out of him, then
let's go back to his draft year, and what did scouts say about him? What they said about him was, we like how he plays, but sometimes he doesn't play very smart. And now he's up here, and what are we saying about him? We're saying basically kind of what they said the year that he was drafted, that, he can't seem to be a coach pleaser. And
well, the quote out of Vancouver today was Travis Green just said, I just read it, said, Jake has to learn to be a hard player to play against, not just get your 20 minutes of ice and play.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to get another, switching off this topic, I wanted to get your opinion, Kevin, on something I wrote about yesterday, which I talked to a lot of people about last night. And that is the fact the Western Conference is is taking apart the Eastern Conference as of late.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 games, there are, and it didn't change last night. Last night they were all interconference games, by the way, and four Western Conference wins, 2 Eastern Conference wins. But over the last 10 games, the Western Conference is 20 games over 500. The entire Eastern Conference is 18 games under 500, and there's only 4 teams above real 500 in the Eastern Conference, and only 4 teams below 500 in the Western Conference over the last 10 games. What's going on? What do you think? Why do you think this is happening?
Well, I mean, we've had a rise in the West of teams. I mean, we've had, Colorado, like the Central Division, despite the fact that we all thought that the Metropolitan was going to be the pool of death, it's really been the Central Division.
Yeah.
Where, the Colorado Avalanche's rise was unanticipated, to say the least. I think everybody thought they'd be better. I said they were going to be 20 points better, but they're significantly better. The Winnipeg Jets, we've been waiting, but we didn't know it would be this year because we weren't sure where their goaltending was. They've been incredible. And the Dallas Stars have played terrific. They've come together now. The Nashville Predators, while they've been a little bumpy lately, they are playing like a contender. The Anaheim Ducks are healthy again. There's a lot of teams playing better in the West. Meanwhile, in the East, the Rangers have hit a bumpy streak. The Carolina Hurricanes have been betrayed by bad goaltending. Hedman got hurt in Tampa Bay, which has really sort of brought them together, or caused their togetherness to kind of dissipate a little bit as well. So, I think it's just the oddity of 4 or 5 teams in the West being much better than we anticipated, and in the last month, some teams going south in the Eastern Conference.
And Palat got hurt yesterday or a couple days ago. He's out for a couple months too, so that weakens Tampa. But 5 of the 7 worst teams in the NHL come from right here in River City, the Atlantic Division.
Yeah, they come from the Atlantic Division. I know. And yet Detroit goes out again, and they beat up on the Devils. They shut out the Devils last night, right? So,
well, they're the first team that beat Vegas in Vegas. So
Detroit has won games you wouldn't expect them to win all year. They can, and they're not yet. They're not. I mean, they're not having a great season, but every time I seem to look at them, they're beating a team that I don't expect them to beat, for whatever reason.
Well, what you see with the Red Wings is what you expect for a team that's relying on younger players.
Yeah,
which is a high degree of inconsistency. And, right now that team is about Larkin, Anthony Ciu, Mantha, Bertuzzi, who's really stepped in and suddenly has moved up in the food chain to, is he second now in terms of their younger players and how important they are? Maybe.
Yeah.
They brought up Hiccups last night. There's this is a team that, really sort of knows that they need these younger players to play well, and
Mrazek's had 2 shutouts in a row. Do you think they trade him tomorrow?
yeah. I mean, he's been one of the worst goalies in the league for the last 2 seasons, and now he's had 2 shutouts. And they're an interesting team, and it's. Right now, if I'm Ken Holland, I'm just looking at that core group of younger players and trying to decide how good Rasmussen's going to be, and you're going to get one more player, this season, and I think they're going to get a first-round pick for Green. I do, or they're going to get a really good prospect, so that'll help them as well. I think they'd be better served. I don't think it's going to happen, but. They want to get a first-round pick, but I'd want to get a guy who's farther down the road. Like they're at a state where if they could get a young defenseman that they know is going to play in the league, like I think that would really serve them.
Russ had mentioned the possibility of Green going back to Washington.
I've heard that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and if they got like a Lucas Johansson, that's Ryan Johansson's brother, who was either a low first or a high second, who's a good prospect. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how willing teams are to trade their firsts anymore, and that's the thing. I still think it's going to end. There's going to be some sort of conditional pick in there for on top of a prospect if they have to go that direction. What I'm wondering with Detroit though is, Kevin, is there any possibility they move guys with like like Nyquist, who have a few years left in their contracts? Are those guys that we would be willing to move out, or do you think those are,
I think they're guys that are more than willing to move out. I just think you can't get anybody to take, the deals. I mean, it's so hard to get anybody to take any contracts because everybody is so tight and trying to move. And, I talked to a lower payroll team who pointed out when you look at the lower payroll teams now, they're not capped out, they're budgeted out. Like there's no room to take any, salaries.
Well, one team that can, Peter, is the Winnipeg Jets, because they're near the top of the conference. They're on a playoff track, and what do they have? Like $6 or $7 million in cap space.
Yeah, they have at the trade deadline. They'll be able to take on $30 million prorated.
Yeah,
like they've got a lot of room.
One of the top teams in the NHL right now. I mean, it's like it's a really good spot to be in.
But next year, everything changes.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. They're someone. I mean, the rumor, and we've talked about this before on past broadcasts, that the rumor is they're looking for a depth center, and they're looking for depth and experience defense.
Right.
So, who fits that mold, right? And that's the biggest question. Would someone like Pacioretty be that kind of player for next year? Well, next year, like taking that salary on next year becomes a problem because Connor Hellebuck's going to get a big raise. Jacob Trouba is going to get a big raise if he's a Winnipeg Jet. I mean, we can talk about that till
the cows come home. Yeah.
Till the cows come home. It's still unknown, but I would have a fairly good. I would believe, and Kevin, you could speak to this. Kevin Cheveldayoff probably knows if Jacob Trouba is going to be a Jet next year. Right now,
yep.
I would think he's got a pretty good idea if they're going to find a number or if the kid just wants out.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't you think though? I mean, I don't have any inside information on this, but I really sense that if Trouba was being sincere about why he wanted out before, that it was about opportunity, considering how important he is to a very good team now, I would think that issue has been resolved. Like, I've watched the Jets enough to know, and I just saw him live. They were in Detroit not all that long ago, and I saw his importance. I talked to him about, the way this defense is playing. Like, he can no longer make the case that, I'm not able to spread my wings because I'm not getting that opportunity. Like, he's very crucial to that team now. So, was he lying? Did he just not want to be in Winnipeg? Well, we'll find out, I think, this summer. Yeah. That's what I think we'll find out. I don't think the money is going to be an issue. I think they can resolve that. I think it'll just come out to see whether he, really wants to just play elsewhere. He's an American boy. Maybe he wants to be in an American city. And, hey, what? That's his right.
And that's the thing. And I think Kevin Cheveldayoff knows the answer to that question, or with Kurt Overhart, and they figure that out and they'll get down to business. But to that point, I mean, this is why they can't take a lot on. 2 new contracts that kick in next season are Nick Ehlers, who's now going from entry level to $6 million a season. Brian Little is moving up about $800,000 in salary on his extension.
Yeah.
And they're going to save some money when Sean Matthias is gone. They've got some, they've got some guys who will be down, but Adam Lowry is going to need a new deal.
But Line A can sign a new extension on July 1, and so can Blake Wheeler. And you can't get more important than those 2 guys.
Exactly. So while there's money right now, there's space right now, it doesn't last forever. And that's the biggest problem for, I think, not problem, but challenge, where there is part of this fan base that says, go in, let's get the guys we need. You may not have the stars align like this ever again. And that's fine, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater while you do it. You've still got to stick to what your liabilities are contractually going forward are. And I think it's easy to forget that. People look on a cap calculator on HockeyBuzz and they say, oh, they got this much to spend just till June 30th.
Yeah, no. And problem is you take those guys and they come with salaries that extend to 2021.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's why I know, Peter, you wrote about this last week, and I wrote about it as well on the weekend. that's why Winnipeg, with the cap space that they have, a guy like a Thomas Buchanan, who's a veteran, a 34-year-old center making $6 million, the market for him, based on the fact that nobody who's a contender can fit that salary under the cap. Maybe Montreal will have to retain salary for most teams to be able to get more for him, but Winnipeg can say, sure, I'll take that. Yeah. And they have enough young prospects in their organization that they can offer something that Montreal actually wants. So that would be a fit.
Absolutely. And Kevin, you can speak to what Mike has written about and myself as well, is I think there's a belief in Winnipeg, Kevin, that there's not enough experience within the group based on how well they're doing. If they do start pushing into a deeper round, is the experience there? And that's one of the desires, to bring some experience in. And I don't know if you've heard some of that.
Yeah, I actually haven't, but you can see that. I mean, who's the flag carrier for this team in the playoffs? That's the, what I would
Bufflin?
say.
Bufflin. Bufflin's your guy who has the most playoff experience.
Yeah, and he does, but he's been in that position, and he's with the physical element, he brings that to it. But I still just don't know that he's quite right. So I could see the argument that they could use just more guys is all. But I like that Winnipeg team, and maybe some of the thing that makes them so dangerous is kind of their younger guys that are really like X factors, like Line A and Kyle Connor and guys that are so talented, and you just keep thinking, well, in any game that each of those guys could put up 3 points, and Ehlers, I mean, they're just all so good. So I think they got to be careful. I mean, their mix is pretty interesting now. So.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do too much if I was Winnipeg.
No, just a complimentary veteran. I mean, nobody who's gonna upset the apple cart too much. One final thing before we end the show, and regarding the Olympics, the announcement came out today from the IOC that a number of Russian players were not given permission to participate in the Olympics. The most notable was Valery Nikushkin, who is under contract to the Dallas Stars, but is in the KHL right now. He left to play. Apparently, it didn't have anything to do with NHL rights, but it also didn't have anything to do with illegal drugs either. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors here about why these players were denied, but the Russians, Kevin, haven't made the announcement of their full roster, and apparently won't until Thursday. This could be the interesting story of the Olympic tournament.
Well, it could be, because everybody wants to know who's going to play. What guys are going to be kind of a part of all that, and no one seems to know. Certainly, no one in the NHL knows. And I've talked to people who are involved in international hockey, and I think there's still. I mean, there's so much politics always involved in Russian hockey. But now on top of this, we have the Olympic ban on Russians, and so everybody's just kind of sorting it out. So I think we're just gonna have to wait and see. Does anyone know?
And Igor Arenko, who was the one who broke the story, at least he was the first tweet I saw about this. He said, it's still possible that the Russians say we're not going to the Olympics, or do something at the 11th hour just to really throw things for a loop. I mean, that would be typical of Mr. Putin, but let's not get into that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? They don't come, they don't come.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, we'll still play.
Well, great show, guys. Thanks, Peter, for coming on. Thanks, Kevin, as always. For Eklund, for Kevin Allen, for Peter Tessier, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.